A few years ago, we tried to buy a house up the road from us. We know the area well, we enjoyed living here, so it all seemed perfect. The elderly gentleman who lived in the house passed away, and so his family was planning on selling the house. We spoke to them, and it was all going to go through privately, and it just all seemed exactly what we needed. We went through the process of trying to get a mortgage, and a few months into it, at some point it seemed to kind of all come to a stop, and it looked like it was going to be the end of the road. However, something happened and we got a different offer given to us that was even better than the first one. At that point, when we shared this with Christian friends, they all said, wow, that's amazing, this is just God. And we thought the same thing. This is just God. This is how God operates. This is what he does. Again, about a month later, similar thing happened. We kind of got to a point where things were not working out. And within a week later, an even better offer came up, and we all said the same thing. This is just God. This is just how he is. This is just how he operates. And so we continued through the journey, but about 3 months later, it all came to an end. We had to pull out completely, and we realised it was just not working out, and it came to an end. Reflecting back, it was quite hard to understand what went on there, why it had to happen the way it did, why it didn't work out for us, why did it seem like this was all kind of God's hand in it, but then it didn't work out for us. We didn't get the house. In the end, about 6 months later, another Christian homeschool family came to view the house. At this point, because we've been through the process already, we were able to tell this family exactly how much we offered. We were able to tell them what's wrong with the house because our builder friend came and did a survey on the house, how much of the house needed fixing. And so we were able to fill them in on all of this detail. And in the end, they managed to buy the house for even less than we offered. So I believe that God used us in this journey. The house was never for us, but he used us to go through this process. So I believe that that was the plan all along. It was never meant or intended for us, but we were able to help this other family get the house, and it was for them all along. Recently, we also tried to buy a house, and we went through the process and got quite close to the end, sealing the whole deal and everything. However, a few things came up right at the end that put a stop to it for us. Again, some of our Christian friends would be thinking, oh, this is just the devil. This is just an attack of the devil, and how frustrating, you came so close and now it's all falling apart. However, in the end, we realized this was God and this was his hand in it. He stopped us from buying a house that was too expensive for us, that we would have been stuck in, and we would have had to work really hard each month to make ends meet. And so God actually protected us from something by stopping all of it. And so my point of all of this is we need to be careful not to give the devil too much credit, not perhaps see the devil behind every bush. I do think that sometimes we can be attacked, and sometimes we can go through weeks or even months where it just feels like all things are up against you. Everything is going wrong. It's all a struggle. It's all a trial, and it just feels constant when you're in it. I do believe these trials come along our way to strengthen us, to build us up, to help us grow. And I think God often allows these trials in our lives for these purposes. But it's not always the devil. I believe as well that we can open ourselves up to the attacks of the devil. Through our disobedience, we can open ourselves up for the enemy's attacks on our health or on our family or in various different ways. When we're disobedient, we can't expect things not to end up being chaotic in our lives, or things just to start falling apart. We can look at the example of Jonah. He's running away from God. God told him to go to Nineveh and he disobeyed. He ran away. And then a storm came, and then he was thrown off the boat, and then a big fish swallowed him. Jonah could have easily in that situation blamed the devil, say it's just an attack of the devil, and being attacked all week long. However, it was because of his disobedience that he was in that situation. Same thing with Lot's wife. Lot and his family, they were told clearly by the angels to not look back on the city. However, she looked back. She was disobedient. Because of her disobedience, she perished in the end. So in these examples, it's not just an attack of the devil. We need to be careful of using this phrase, it's just an attack of the devil, or I'm being attacked all the time. Sometimes it can be our flesh as well. If you are going to have bad conduct in your workplace, and not long after, you might see trouble in your workplace, you might see disputes with colleagues, you might see disagreements following, and that simply be because of things that you're doing in the flesh. That could simply be because of your conduct. In a similar way, if you're going to have an argument with your husband and you're really disrespectful and you're saying really awful things, and then an argument follows where you're not speaking for the next few days, you can't blame the devil for that sort of thing. That is you reacting out in your flesh. You were disrespectful, you were saying some stuff you shouldn't have, and now there's consequences that follow. In the same way, if you want to perhaps say something hurtful to a friend and suddenly the friendship comes to an end, you can't blame the devil for that. If you were doing stuff in the flesh and acting out in the flesh and things follow as a result, that is not just something we can blame the devil for. So, having said all of this, I think it's important that we don't make up a conclusion about who God is and how he operates and trying to work things out in our own minds. Just simply because something's happened one time, it doesn't mean that that is the same way that God's going to do things again for you in your life. And then after that, you make up a whole theory about how God is and how he operates and how he does things. We need to be very careful of that. Likewise, in the same way of the devil, blaming the devil for certain things in our lives when actually it's our flesh, or it's because we're disobedient, or actually it might be that it's God allowing certain things in our lives for a reason or for a purpose. And so, yes, we can't fully understand and fathom God and how good and great and how awesome he is and how he chooses to do things. And the scripture that comes to mind is in Isaiah 55. It says, "My thoughts are higher than your thoughts, and neither are your ways my ways." So we can't fully fathom God and understand him. I hope this helped you today and perhaps made you think of some of these situations in your lives where it seems like it's God, or it's the devil's attacks, or it might even be your flesh. Definitely something to consider and think about. I think we do pick up a lot of things in the Christian world that we just say for the sake of it. And some of these things are much more complex than we realise. Right, thank you for listening. See you in the next one. Bye.